Sarah Cummings had had a difficult day. The single mother, who had previously struggled financially, now required medical attention for her sick son. However, just as the mother had given up hope, her 9-year-old son stepped up. He locked his gaze on a nearby police officer who was eating and slowly walked towards him, holding a folded piece of paper in his hand. Sarah and her son live in Tonawanda, New York. She had recently fallen on hard times, and things were only getting worse. After her father died in 2015, her adoring mother discovered a parking ticket on her car after the funeral. Then, while trying to resolve the situation at the courthouse, she came across a cop who was giving another parking ticket. But bad things didn't end there. Sarah's landlord evicted her, and when she returned from court to settle the dispute, she discovered the same cop writing out another parking ticket. Despite struggling to pay for her father's funeral, parking tickets, and a new apartment, Sarah managed to put on a brave face in front of her child, and when her son Stephen became ill and needed to be admitted to the hospital, she thought she could handle it, until she saw the doctor's bill. She knew she couldn't afford the co-payment as soon as she saw the bill. That's when the tough mom said, "Enough." An argument between her and the doctor erupted. They both yelled extremely loudly that most people waiting in the office were aware of Sarah's financial hardships, including her son. The mother had reached rock bottom. She had to overdraft her account to cover the co-pay. She only had $15 in her pocket, which she spent on breakfast for her son at Denny's and the remaining few dollars at the arcade. Then, as he was leaving the arcade, Stephen noticed something that made him instantly freeze. The police officer who had issued her mother all those parking tickets. Stephen has decided that when he grows up, he wants to be a police officer. Because he idolizes cops so much, he is completely awestruck whenever he sees one. However, after hearing about his mother's parking problems, he became conflicted. Stephen was eating breakfast when Stephen was just a few tables away from Tonawanda PD Officer Ryan Uribe, who was eating alone. Stephen was nervous while thinking about what to do. His next move could make or break the family. Stephen genuinely needed to speak with Officer Uribe about the parking tickets, but he's a quiet person who couldn't think of anything to say. While he continued to eat, Stephen deliberated on how he could approach the officer. He had an idea and told his mother about it all of a sudden. As she watched her son put everything on the line, she thought it was perfect. Stephen approached the counter and spoke with one of the waitresses. He told the waitress what he wanted. She walked away and returned seconds later with a piece of paper and a pen. Stephen began writing after she handed it to him. What Stephen wrote on that piece of paper will leave you speechless. Stephen finished his writing and walked slowly over to Uribe's table. Even though he was terrified, he summoned the courage to approach him and hand him the paper without saying anything. The officer was initially perplexed by the paper Stephen handed him, but when he got a closer look, his face turned bright red. "Ah, dialoho!" Uribe was completely taken aback when he was handed the receipt for his breakfast. Stephen had turned 9 just a few days before and had received some money as a birthday present. Stephen decided to spend some of his money on breakfast for Uribe. But that wasn't all. Stephen had also written a note for Uribe, complete with carefully crafted words, saying that God takes care of his poor peasant people in the country and that no one need feel guilty about taking care of his family. The note said that he wanted to be him when he grows up. He also thanked him for his assistance. The officer couldn't believe it. After all, no one expects to have their meal paid for by a 9-year-old child. He knew he had to express his gratitude right away. When the officer discovered who his mother was, the officer's initial warm feeling was quickly replaced. Officer Uribe leapt out of his chair and motioned for Stephen to take a picture with him. The boy was overjoyed because he'd not only met one of his heroes, but he now had a photo with him as well. The officer then made one simple phone call to repay the gesture, which completely changed Sarah's life. Stephen's mother later shared the cop's photo on Facebook, unaware of the outpouring of support, expressing how much she was very proud of her son when the child requests that they pay for an officer's breakfast. It was all written on his receipt. Sarah wrote all about it in her post, and IT was immediately greeted with positive feedback, with many people praising Stephen for his big heart and his mother for raising him correctly. But she had no idea who was going to share her post. When Officer Uribe told his colleagues what had happened, they decided to contact Sarah and ask if they could share the story on their Facebook page. Stephen had today touched all of their hearts, and his help meant a lot to all of the men and women who put the uniform every day. The officer knew what to do after meeting with the mother and hearing her story. He contacted his captain at the Tonawanda Police Department and instructed him to drop the parking tickets as soon as possible. They were gone in an instant. However, as word of this touching moment spread throughout the police department, other officers came out to express their gratitude to the family for their support of the officers in blue. The officer explained that it meant everything to him. It meant that he had to get up every morning, put on this uniform, and go out there and do his job. It meant that he had to keep trying to be a good example to all these young guys. But it was Stephen and Officer Uribe's relationship which got most of the attention, even from the media. Apparently, Stephen had confirmed his status as a cop in the presence of the honored elite family, because they were eager to hear from him on the radio that everything had been fine. After the story went viral, ABC 7 News interviewed Stephen and the officer, and Officer Uribe even let Stephen climb aboard his patrol car. The cop now carries Stephen's note with him wherever he goes, keeping it in the front pocket of his uniform. The officer was planning to keep the note as long as he can, to remember him by every day. By sharing his home signal, she was helping the world to pick up the scattered pieces. Stephen, a 9-year-old boy from Tonawanda, New York, made a heartfelt gesture despite his family's financial struggles. After his single mother, Sarah, faced hardships, including parking tickets and medical bills, Stephen used his birthday money to pay for a police officer's breakfast. He handed Officer Ryan Uribe a note expressing his admiration for police officers. Touched by the boy's kindness, Uribe rallied his department to waive Sarah's parking tickets and shared the story, which quickly went viral. The heartfelt moment brought media attention, with Stephen and Uribe forming a special bond that inspired many. What do you guys think about Stephen's gesture? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comment section below and let us know. Was this a conscientious touch or a conscious avoidance?